He used me for his reputation. Then I showed up on the red carpet. Pregnant. Part 1. Chapter 1. The Contract. The first time Mira Lane saw Jackson Vane in person, he was exactly as untouchable as he looked on magazine covers, 6 feet of sculpted arrogance in a velvet Tom Ford blazer, surrounded by a small orbit of agents, models, and media execs. He didn't notice her that day, and she wasn't meant to be noticed. She was hired to steam the clothes, not wear them. Mira was used to being invisible. She'd worked behind the scenes for nearly 3 years in La's fashion underworld, pinning sleeves on sample sizes, hand-washing gowns at 2 a.m., and getting burned by both hot irons and colder egos. She had grit, style, and a knack for staying silent when powerful people spoke. That was, apparently, her most valuable skill. So when Mira's phone lit up with an unknown number a week later, she was standing in the back of a set, lint-rolling a male model's inner thigh. "Are you open to exclusive freelance work? Private, discreet, well compensated." That was all the voice said. And Mira, curious and broke, said yes. The next day, she was ushered into a penthouse suite in Beverly Hills. The air smelled like leather and secrets. A woman named Roxanne Black, Jackson Vane's publicist, known for rebuilding the careers of spiraling megastars, sat across from her, manicured fingers folded, smile too tight to be warm. "You've been selected," Roxanne said, like Mira had won a game she never entered. "Mr. Vane needs a girlfriend. A believable one. Someone fresh, unknown, photogenic. You check the boxes." Mira blinked. "Excuse me. It's a 6-month PR contract. You'll be compensated monthly. You'll live at the Pacifica residence, full service, no press obligations unless scripted. You'll be seen at events, in curated locations, and occasionally in his car. He may or may not hold your hand. It's all flexible." "Flexible?" Mira echoed. "In short, be his girlfriend. On paper, on Instagram, in the back seat of an Uber SUV. But not in bed. Unless you both choose otherwise." Roxanne's voice barely shifted. "We're not selling sex. We're selling stability." Mira laughed, too loudly. "Why me?" "Because you're pretty, poised, and you don't run your mouth." Roxanne slid a folder across the table. "And you're desperate enough to say yes." The folder was thick. The money inside the contract was real. Mira could pay off her student loans, buy her mother's medication, and never touch a lint roller again. But what hooked her most wasn't the paycheck. It was him. Jackson Vane. The man who made women swoon with one smirk, who played broken boys with haunted eyes and won awards for it. The man she used to watch from her studio apartment, curled in a thrift blanket, wondering what it would feel like to exist in his world. Now he was offering her a key to it, even if that key came with strings. "Why does he need this?" she asked, half knowing. Roxanne didn't flinch. "Because he got caught exiting the Chateau Marmont with 2 influencers and a bag of mushrooms. His studio wants him clean. Committed. Relatable. You're the reset button." That's when Mira realized, this wasn't about love or attraction. It was optics. She was a tool, a mirror to reflect the version of Jackson Vane the public wanted to see. "Still," she asked, "and what happens when it ends?" "You get a bonus and a non-disclosure agreement. You disappear. Or, if you're clever, you ride the exposure to something better." Roxanne's smile widened. "Just don't fall for him. He won't catch you. Mira signed the contract that day, with a gold pen and a trembling hand. She told herself it was temporary. Just a role. Like costume design, but for real life. She would play the part, make a name for herself, and walk away richer, smarter, and untouched. But deep down, somewhere behind the layers of pride and practicality, a small voice whispered something reckless. What if it's real? She didn't know it then, but she wasn't the only one breaking rules. Jackson would break the contract first, with a kiss. And Mira Lane, stylist, ghost girlfriend, nobody from nowhere, would one day make sure the entire world watched him regret it. Chapter 2: The Deal Breaker. The first time Jackson kissed Mira, it wasn't part of the script. They were standing on the marble steps outside the Lucian Gala, a high glamour fashion benefit filled with glittering people and backroom deals. The paparazzi lights flared like fireworks, and Mira wore a deep red slip dress stitched by a seamstress in Paris and approved by 4 layers of PR teams. Her instructions were clear: arm in arm, one soft smile, no direct eye contact after 30 seconds. Jackson leaned in for the whisper shot, where he would angle his lips near her ear for a photo that would spark a million fan theories. She turned her head slightly, instinctively, to hear him better over the chaos. And that's when he kissed her. No warning. No wink. No soft "I'm going in." Just his lips brushing hers like he'd been waiting all night. The camera flashes went wild. Somewhere behind them, a tabloid editor was already typing, "New power couple." Inside the car afterward, Mira stared out the window, stunned into silence. Jackson sat beside her like nothing had happened, scrolling through his phone. "That wasn't in the plan," she said quietly. He shrugged. "It looked natural." "That's what they want, right?" "It was natural," she said, then regretted it the moment it left her mouth. He glanced at her, smile crooked. "Maybe we're just really good at fake." But it didn't feel fake. Not anymore. The weeks that followed blurred into something unreal. Jackson started texting her, not through his assistant, but directly. He'd send her photos of his coffee foam shaped like hearts. Voice memos of him rehearsing scenes and forgetting his lines mid-monologue. Late-night calls when insomnia clawed at him and he needed to hear her voice. At events, his hand lingered longer on her back. At home, he started requesting she stay later, just a few minutes, then an hour, then overnight. She began leaving things at his penthouse: a hair tie on the sink, a hoodie draped over the couch, a book beside the bed. Once, she found him asleep on the floor of his media room, curled under a blanket, surrounded by empty whiskey glasses and a paused movie. She didn't ask what he was running from. She just laid down beside him. He let her in, carefully, like someone unlocking a door just enough to peek through. And Mira fell. Not in a firework exploding, violin swelling kind of way. It was quieter. A slow bloom of warmth every time he looked at her, like she was real, not rented. He told her she made him forget who he was supposed to be. She told him she wasn't afraid of who he really was. He laughed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You should be." The night they slept together was accidental, then inevitable. They were in Lake Tahoe for a private weekend photo op, Volt's idea to show the couple in a cozy, rustic setting. She was meant to wear flannel. He was supposed to build a fire and smile for a drone. Instead, it rained. They stayed inside the glass-walled cabin, alone, the storm turning everything blue and electric. He cooked pasta. She spilled wine. He pressed a towel to her blouse. And when she looked up at him, barefoot, hair damp, cheeks flushed, he kissed her again. Slower this time. No cameras. No PR team. Just him. That night, everything blurred. His skin against hers. His voice in the dark. The way he held her afterward like he wasn't sure he'd be able to let go. No promises were made. But everything was said in silence. 3 days later, he disappeared. No texts. No calls. Her name vanished from his feed. His publicist was unavailable for comment. When she finally got through to his assistant, the reply was clinical: Mr. Vane is unavailable. The contract will proceed as originally agreed. Please do not reach out again outside scheduled events. Scheduled events. The bed was still warm. Her toothbrush was still in his drawer. Then the headlines hit. Jackson Vane caught with starlet Ivy Saint, new love or old flame reignited. The photos were brutal. Him, grinning ear to ear, holding Ivy close on a yacht. Her lips on his neck. Champagne spraying in slow motion. The same smile he gave Mira, now recycled and resold for the press. Mira stared at her phone, thumb frozen mid-scroll. Her stomach turned. Her hands shook. Not from heartbreak, at least, not yet. From rage. Because she hadn't been just a contract. Not in that bed. Not in those nights. Not when he whispered her name like it meant something. But now, she understood. He broke the rules with a kiss. She broke her heart with a hope. And the next time the cameras caught her face, it would be because she was the story. Not him. Chapter 3: Ghosted and Gutted. Mira refreshed the message thread. Again. And again. Nothing. The red receipts had disappeared 2 days ago, one of the first signs. His Instagram, once filled with the choreographed chaos of their relationship, now looked sterile. Her tagged photos vanished one by one. Their Valentine's campaign for Volt. Gone. Their snowy couple shot in Tahoe, where she had leaned against his chest while he buried his face in her hair. Deleted. At first, she told herself it was a glitch. Maybe a rebrand. Maybe Roxanne was cleaning things up for a bigger push. Or maybe, somehow, he was just busy. But as the silence stretched into days, denial gave way to a slow, rising dread. When she opened her phone to post a throwback selfie, a soft, amber-lit shot of her laughing next to Jackson's coffee mug, she noticed the follow list. Jackson Vane had unfollowed her. Not just unfollowed. Blocked. Her throat tightened. She tried to search his name from a burner account. The profile was still there, still perfect. Still curated. He'd kept the dog photo. The Rolex promo. But anything with her. Erased, like a fever dream he'd sweated out and was ashamed to remember. She didn't call. She knew better. But she did text. Hey. If this is part of some rollout plan, you could have just told me. Silence is worse. Nothing. You promised this was more than just press. You said I made you feel real. Nothing. You don't get to vanish like this. Not after. Still nothing. She stared at her phone for hours that night, curled in her apartment, an apartment that had once felt temporary, like a stopover before the real version of her life began. Now, it felt like a prison. Every surface reminded her of him. His cologne still clung to the inside of her coat. His toothbrush was still in her drawer, untouched and mockingly blue. And then came the final blow. 2 weeks after the silence began, Mira walked into a grocery store in Silver Lake, half dressed in yesterday's sweats, craving silence and soda water, and saw them. The tabloid rack. Front and center. Jackson and Ivy, Hollywood's hottest reunion. They were on a yacht. Crystal water, sunlit skin. Ivy Saint, goddess of romcoms and tabloid royalty, straddled his lap in a Billionaire bikini. His hands were on her waist. Her mouth was on his neck. They were toasting champagne. He was smiling. Her smile. On someone else's mouth. Mira stood frozen in front of the stand, soda slipping from her grip. The can hit the floor and rolled into the feet of an old woman buying lottery tickets. She didn't even flinch. The article headline burned behind her eyes. Back together and hotter than ever. Jackson Vane rekindles flame with former fiancée Ivy Saint after ditching short-lived mystery fling. Mystery fling. That's all she was now. A footnote. A placeholder. A ghost in his timeline. Back in her apartment, Mira sat on the floor surrounded by things she didn't remember owning. Scarves, half-used candles, press samples, a bracelet he once complimented. She pulled out the contract again, creased, coffee-stained, still signed with that gold pen. She read every clause. Every rule. Every boundary. It was all so clinical. So neat. But what happened between them hadn't been neat. It had been messy. Late-night confessions. Lingering stares. Him reading her poetry from a book he'd once pretended to hate. The night he cried in her lap watching a documentary about his estranged brother. He let her see him, and now he was pretending she'd never existed. Worse, he had replaced her. With Ivy Saint. The PR dream. The one studios loved. The one America already forgave once for cheating on her last co-star. The one who looked at the camera like she'd never known pain. Mira felt her stomach twist. Because Ivy wasn't random. She was chosen. And Mira was erased. No statement. No closure. No dignity. Just a headline and a memory. The heartbreak wasn't just romantic. It was strategic. Jackson hadn't ghosted her because he didn't care. He'd ghosted her because she was never meant to last longer than the campaign. She was the transition girl. The bridge. The nobody. And if he thought she'd slink away in shame, he had no idea who he was dealing with. Chapter 4 Double Betrayal. Mira stared at the screen, her laptop dimmed but still open to the same image, Jackson and Ivy Saint, mid-laugh, basking on the yacht like they had just won the lottery. Her eyes burned, but she couldn't look away. Not yet. Not until she understood why. Because it wasn't just that he left. Or ghosted. Or deleted her from his digital life like a glitchy app. It was that he had done it strategically. The kind of cold, calculated betrayal no amount of heartbreak could fully explain. She didn't just want answers. She wanted the truth. Raw. Undiluted. And dangerous. So she started digging. It began innocently. A friend from her styling days, Kira, still worked with Vault, the fashion label that had orchestrated much of Jackson's rebrand. Kira owed Mira a favor, and Mira cashed it in with a text that simply said, "What's the real story with Jackson and Ivy? No PRBS. I need to know." Kira's reply came 2 hours later. 3 words. Meet me. Alone. They met at a tiny wine bar in Los Feliz that didn't care if you cried in public. Kira looked around, leaned in, and whispered, "You didn't hear this from me." "What?" Mira whispered back, throat dry. "Ivy's father is Theodore Saint." Mira blinked. "The film guy?" Kira nodded grimly. "Executive director of Mythos Studios." Mythos Studios. The studio behind the Titan Ascending franchise, $3 billion blockbusters, a cultural juggernaut, and the very series Jackson had been begging to join. He'd auditioned for the lead in the next film, Titan Reborn, twice. "You're saying Ivy's casting couch?" Mira asked, stunned. Kira shook her head. "Not exactly. It's worse. She volunteered. The plan was cooked up months ago. PR engagement, press tour, social media love story, all timed to coincide with Mythos's casting window. Ivy gets the public goodwill. Jackson gets the role. And Daddy Saint gets to control the headlines. So I was just," Mira trailed off. "A placeholder. A palate cleanser," Kira said softly. "You made him look grounded. Approachable. You softened the scandals. But you were never part of the endgame." Mira gripped the edge of the bar stool. Her stomach churned. "So everyone knew. Everyone important, yeah. Even Roxanne. They needed a girl who wasn't famous. Someone easy to erase. Easy to erase." The words echoed like a gunshot inside her ribs. She'd thought she was part of something. Maybe not a fairy tale, but something. A story with weight. With meaning. With intimacy. She had believed his whispers. His touch. His tears. But it wasn't real. It was chess. And she was a pawn, sacrificed for a checkmate she never saw coming. On the way home, Mira walked instead of driving. Her thoughts were too loud for a closed car. The city lights blurred. The hum of traffic was white noise behind the roar in her chest. She replayed everything, every soft kiss, every late-night text, every time he told her she made him feel safe. And every moment, she now realized, had been choreographed. He had lied to her with his mouth, his hands, his heart. But what cut deeper than all of it, deeper than the blocking, deeper than the erasure, was that Ivy knew. She had to. She wasn't an innocent rebound. She was part of the strategy. The whole thing had been arranged like a movie scene. And Mira had been the stand-in until the real star arrived. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was humiliation. Public, calculated, and industrially sponsored. She didn't sleep that night. She opened the contract again, this time looking not for emotional closure, but legal ammunition. And buried deep on page 9, beneath the fine print and non-disclosures, she found it, a clause requiring good faith engagement and clear communication by all parties. He hadn't just broken her heart. He broke the contract. And in doing so, he gave her leverage. She shut the file. Her reflection caught in the laptop screen, tired, wild-eyed, and quietly burning. They thought she was forgettable. Replaceable. That she'd vanish back into anonymity. But Jackson had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated what a nobody could do when she had nothing left to lose. Chapter 5 The Two Lines. The box sat on her bathroom counter like a threat. Unopened. Heavy. Loud, even in silence. Mira had bought it on a whim, half out of dread, half out of denial. A sleek, plastic-wrapped pregnancy test in matte pink packaging, buried beneath cough drops and gum in a brown paper bag. The cashier didn't look her in the eye. Neither did Mira. She hadn't had her period in over 6 weeks. She'd told herself it was stress. Or hormones. Or maybe a delayed backlash from being emotionally detonated by a world-class manipulator with perfect cheekbones. But her body knew before her brain did. She was nauseous every morning. Couldn't stand the smell of coffee anymore. Her jeans, once a second skin, now fought her button by button. But the final push came when she was scrolling through headlines, the ones she pretended she no longer read. Jackson Vane unbuttoned in Milan, lands cover of Icon magazine. He was standing on the cobblestones of some Italian alley, in a custom camel trench, sipping espresso with Ivy Saint's lipstick still visible on his neck. Grinning. Effortless golden. Unbuttoned. There it was again. That word. It made her stomach turn. She slammed her laptop shut, bolted for the bathroom, and vomited until her knees trembled. And that's when she knew. She opened the test. Hands shaking. 2 minutes stretched into something eternal. The plastic stick lay on the counter like a weapon she was afraid to pick up. Her reflection in the mirror was pale. Her lips were bloodless. Her eyes had lost that spark she once had in every behind-the-scenes fitting, every rushed backstage show. Now she looked like someone who had been burned out from the inside. And yet, there was still something alive in her. She forced herself to look. 2 pink lines. Clear. Unmistakable. No maybe. No wait and see. Pregnant. The floor felt cold as she sat down, knees curled to her chest. The kind of cold that came not just from tile but from disbelief. Pregnant. She said it out loud, just to test how it tasted. It tasted like fire. And ash. And something frighteningly real. There was no one to tell. No one to scream at. No Jackson, no Roxanne, no fake publicist-crafted romance to collapse into. Just silence, and the harsh, stunning reality that her body had become its own secret. He had left her with this. A heartbeat inside her. Growing, multiplying, anchoring itself deeper with every passing second. And what was Jackson doing right now? Smiling. Signing contracts. Whispering lies into Ivy Saint's ear under the glow of European chandeliers. At some point, Mira stood. She washed her face. Pulled her hair into a bun. Stared at her eyes again in the mirror. She wasn't crying anymore. Not because she wasn't broken. But because the betrayal had solidified into something sharper. Resolve. Jackson had destroyed her career. Her reputation. He made her a disposable PR footnote in his redemption arc. And now. He had left her pregnant and invisible. But Mira Lane wasn't going to stay invisible. If he thought she would disappear quietly, fade into the background while he kissed cameras and collected accolades, he didn't understand the kind of fire he'd ignited. This pregnancy wasn't a tragedy. It was evidence. Of their time. Of his lie. Of her power. And someday soon, the entire world was going to see it. In full color. On the biggest stage. With a smile that said, "Remember me now." Chapter 6: The Blackout. Mira disappeared the next morning. No note. No Instagram story. No teary goodbye or vague taking time for myself statement. Just silence. Sudden. Total. Her apartment in Silver Lake was found empty by the end of the week. Her neighbors said they saw movers carry out boxes in the early hours of dawn, but no one saw her. Her phone disconnected. Her socials vanished. Her email auto-reply, this account is no longer monitored. Mira Lane, once a rising figure in the fashion undercurrent and a tabloid fixture by association, went dark, as if LA had swallowed her whole and forgotten to spit her back out. And just like that, the stories started. Mira Lane meltdown. Sources say stylist was obsessed with Jackson Vane. Unstable, jealous, difficult. Insider claims Mira's behavior pushed actor away. The words stung not because they were false, but because they were engineered. Carefully, surgically planted. Jackson's team had gone into overdrive, reshaping the public narrative like clay on a wheel. She wasn't his discarded lover. She was a liability. An emotional outburst. An unstable attachment. A private matter that turned volatile. They leaked anonymous tips to entertainment outlets suggesting Mira had grown too attached during their brief creative partnership. That she'd blurred boundaries. That she'd sent excessive messages after the contract had ended. Mira read none of it. But she felt it. She felt it in the texts that stopped coming. The friends who suddenly took longer to respond. The invitations that dried up. Even her old stylist crew, tight-knit, loyal, went radio silent, fearful of biting the hand that could one day hire them. And Jackson. He never said a word. Never corrected the rumors. Never stepped in. His silence was his signature. In truth, Mira hadn't had a breakdown. She hadn't stalked him. She hadn't screamed or thrown anything or begged for him back. What she had done was plan. Her disappearance wasn't chaos. It was control. She booked a last-minute flight under her middle name, Lane, and rerouted through 3 cities before landing in a coastal village in southern Portugal, a quiet, windblown town where the cafes didn't have Wi-Fi and no one cared who you used to date. She checked into a hillside villa owned by an old friend of a friend who owed her a favor. The air there was salted and crisp, the kind that carried secrets to sea. It was the first time she'd breathed in weeks. There, surrounded by wildflowers and fog, Mira let herself crumble, not loudly, not dramatically, but in little pieces. A soft undoing. She slept without makeup. Let her skin peel from sun. Let her belly swell beneath oversized sweaters without shame. She cried into foreign pillows. She screamed into the waves. And then, she started to rebuild. Not a career. Not a revenge fantasy. Herself. Meanwhile, the internet was having a field day. Where is Mira Lane? Why did she delete everything? Was she institutionalized? Did she fake the relationship for clout? Did she blackmail Jackson and lose? The theories were vicious. But the loudest one, the one pushed gently by Jackson's PR machine, was the easiest to digest. She loved him too much. He tried to help. But she was unstable. He had to move on. And because Jackson smiled so sweetly and said nothing cruel, the world believed him. He was painted as the reluctant heartthrob. The gentleman. The one who tried. Mira became a cautionary tale for women who got too close. And in that silence, in that very calculated blackout, something inside her turned ruthless. On her last night in Portugal, she stood on the edge of a cliff, belly just starting to show, hair wind-whipped, watching the stars scatter over the sea like shattered glass. The world thought she was gone. Broken. Defeated. Good. Because by the time she returned, she wouldn't just tell her side of the story. She would show it. And the world wouldn't just listen. It would scream. Chapter 7 Enter Nemesis. The first time Noi reached out, Mira thought it was a mistake. She had been living quietly in Portugal for nearly 6 weeks. Her days were simple: sun, sea, silence. No Wi-Fi, no mirrors with harsh lighting, no curated glamour feeds. Just long walks down sunburnt trails and slow mornings with herbal tea and prenatal vitamins. Her body was changing, growing in slow pulses. Her belly had rounded softly beneath the cotton dresses she wore barefoot around the villa. Her skin glowed, less from makeup and more from the peace of being unseen. She had spent weeks alone with her thoughts. Not plotting revenge, not yet, but watching the fog of her grief and humiliation lift, layer by layer. She still had anger. Still had pain. But it no longer ruled her. It had cooled, hardened, crystallized. So when her old-fashioned contact, Genevieve, an unpredictable, vicious French casting agent who had once called Mira the only stylist in LA who could make a red carpet look like war, texted out of the blue, Mira hesitated to even open it. Genevieve. Marbelle, Noi wants you. Not as a stylist. As the face. The new face. Pregnant and all. You in? Mira stared at her screen, heart thudding. Her phone had barely buzzed in over a month. She hadn't even reinstalled her apps. No one knew where she was, not even her landlord in LA. And yet somehow, Noi had found her. Noi was the antithesis of Vault, where Vault was commercial, glossy, and celebrity safe. Noi was chaotic and couture. Black leather and brutalism. Known for its rebellious aesthetic and unapologetic edge, Noi didn't chase trends. It killed them. Mira had once dressed a model for Noi's winter campaign in a barbed wire bustier and raw silk opera gloves. She remembered thinking, this is fashion with teeth. Now they wanted her. Not to hide. Not to pose beside someone else. To lead. The call came that night. A woman's voice, sleek, accented, and unbothered, crackled through the line. Mira Lane said Celeste Malraux, creative director of Noi. We don't want you because you're beautiful. We want you because you're dangerous. I'm pregnant, Mira said plainly. Good. They said pregnancy ruins women. I think it remakes them. We want that. We want you. Mira swallowed. To do what, exactly? To become the face of our rebellion, Celeste replied. We don't need a model. We need a moment. You are that moment. The offer was wild. Noi would fly her to Paris under full confidentiality. They'd give her creative control over an upcoming campaign, design, narrative, even casting. She would model the line, visibly pregnant, as a bold rejection of beauty norms and an open challenge to Vault, who had recently cast Ivy Saint in their family-friendly spring renewal campaign. The theme for Noi's counter-campaign. Unearthed, the woman they tried to bury. Mira nearly dropped the phone. At first, she hesitated. Fear tugged at her. She hadn't been seen in months. Her face, her story, her womb, they were all private now. Sacred. Was she really ready to walk back into the storm? But then she remembered Ivy Saint's smug smile on the yacht. The Whisper campaign calling her unstable. The way Jackson never once defended her. The way the world believed his version of her, hysterical, irrelevant, disposable. This was her chance to take the narrative back, and blow it the hell up. 1 week later, Mira stepped off a black car onto a private runway in Paris, hair windswept, a bump visible beneath a loose cashmere coat. The Noi team greeted her like a queen returning from exile. There were no mockings, whispers. No side eyes. No pity. Only cameras. Lighting rigs. Sketches of her face in thick charcoal. An entire boardroom of creative directors waiting for her opinion. She was no longer the accessory. She was the story. The studio loft in Montmartre pulsed with purpose. Over the next few days, Mira worked like a woman reborn. She tore through mood boards. Scrapped entire lookbooks. Rewrote scripts. Rejected empowering pastel tones for stark blacks, blood reds, and metals. She titled the campaign's short film herself. Vanish This. In one of the shots, she stood in a glass box, naked but for a black veil, holding her belly while headlines projected across her skin, hysterical, unstable, stalker, irrelevant. At the end, she looked straight into the camera and whispered. I wasn't unstable. I was pregnant. Celeste cried when she saw the cut. Mira didn't. She wasn't sad anymore. She was ready. Jackson had traded her for a safer, shinier lie. Now the truth was coming back in 4K high definition. And this time, she wouldn't just trend. She would detonate. Chapter 8 Rebirth in Paris. The lights of Paris didn't twinkle that night. They blazed. The rain had stopped just before the cameras arrived, leaving the cobblestones slick and luminous, as though the city itself had polished every street in her honor. The Noi Winter Show was one of fashion's most exclusive and cutthroat invitations. Held annually in a candlelit cathedral on the edge of the Seine, it wasn't just a runway, it was an event. The kind that decided careers, dictated trends, and bent the rules of what was wearable and what was unforgettable. And tonight, Mira Lane was the final act. Inside, the cathedral thrummed with power. Gold leaf pillars stretched toward the sky. The elite of the elite, designers, editors, rogue royals, billionaires with trophy lovers, sat in hushed anticipation beneath stained glass windows. Vogue live streamed the event to over 4.5 million viewers. Paparazzi buzzed outside, hungry for chaos. Celeste Malraux, Noi's creative director, stood backstage like a priest before a sacrament. She turned to Mira and smiled faintly. You ready, Ma Belle? Mira nodded. Her gown was black lace, hand-sewn, sheer, and unapologetically bold. It clung to her like a second skin, wrapped around her figure with ethereal elegance. Her baby bump was fully visible, emphasized, embraced. A golden Noi brooch was clipped just below her breastbone. No illusions. No distractions. This wasn't about hiding. This was her rebirth. The music began, low, haunting, a blend of organ and thunder. Models passed in a blur of feathers and flame, but no one remembered them. Because then, Mira walked out. She emerged like a ghost returning to haunt the world that tried to forget her. The crowd stilled. Phones rose. Cameras clicked like applause. There she was. Mira Lane, 7 months pregnant, in full command. Her chin was high, her eyes deadly still. Her stride was slow, intentional. Every inch of her radiated fury, grace, power. Not a fallen star. Not a jilted woman. A force. She stopped halfway down the runway and turned, not to the crowd, but to the live stream camera. And she stared. For 5 full seconds, Mira Lane looked directly into the lens as if she were speaking to one person in particular. You. Somewhere in Milan, Jackson Vane was watching. Somewhere in LA, Ivy Saint was clenching her teeth. Somewhere across the globe, millions of women were leaning forward, whispering, "Who the hell is that?" The next morning, the headlines erupted. Who is she? Vogue. The face that came back pregnant, powerful, and unbothered. Mira Lane breaks the internet in black lace bombshell look variety. Jackson who? Noise mystery muse steals the season Vanity Fair. TikTok stitched her walk with feminist anthems. Twitter exploded with frame-by-frame breakdowns of her stare. Instagram flooded with black lace recreations. Even skeptics were forced to admit it, she wasn't forgotten. She was redefined. A woman used for a man's image had now weaponized her own. And the internet wasn't just watching. It was obsessed. That night, Noise official campaign launched. A cinematic short film featuring Mira, voice-overed by her own words, filmed in fragmented sequences of smoke, glass, and firelight. They used my silence like it was consent. They said I was unstable. But I was growing a whole new world inside me. Now I'm not asking to be seen. I'm demanding it. The final frame. A slow pan of her standing in the cathedral alone, lit by a single spotlight. Her hand on her belly. Eyes on the viewer. Caption. Rebirth. The reaction was immediate. Explosive. Fashion brands tripped over themselves to work with her. Feminist groups called her a symbol of reclamation. Her name became its own hashtag, #Mira Unmuted. But Mira wasn't reading the comments. She was sitting in the Paris loft Noy had given her for the season, watching the sun rise over a world she had just set on fire. She ran a hand along her belly. Felt the tiny, certain kicks of a life she had once been afraid to carry. And she smiled, not softly, not shyly. But like a woman who had come back from the dead to dismantle the kingdom that buried her. Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of betrayal, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself. Share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is becoming unforgettable.